Hello and welcome to this Petrosys webinar. My name is Christopher Lund and I'm a support geoscientist for Petrosys here in our Glasgow office, and today we're going to be having a look at some of the new headline features that have been made available in the new release of Petrosys version 17.6. So we're going to start at having a look at the connection side of Petrosys. So we now have the new well import wizard, which allows us to write well headers, tops and surveys into Petrel. We also have new exchange options to write grids and surfaces into Petrel. We can also direct display and import of IHS Kingdom grids, culture and polygon files. We also have the direct link to Doug Insight, and there's also more control now available over third-party connections via data selection. On the mapping side, we see the new Spatial Editor, and we also have improvements with our contour labeling and the contour overpost correction. There's also been dramatic performance increases when displaying large grids due to some optimizations within the software. And we also have the Spatial Data Translator, which has been further extended to include more output data sources and the filtering of the data outputs. Now I'm going to start the demo. Now, we've had a number of clients who have waited to upgrade directly to Petrosys version 17.6. So I'm going to start by mentioning some features that have been added in Petrosys 17.5. So Petrosys is now compatible with Petrel 2014. And for those of you who use the Petrosys Petrel plugin, you'll be used to seeing the icon to launch Petrosys embedded within Petrel at the side of the window just here. But as Petrel have now changed the way in which their user interface is displayed, they've now moved to this ribbon interface, similar to those seen within Office. So I'm just going to change the user face now to the new ribbon user face, and as you can see, the Petrosys Petrel plugin is no longer located at the side of the window, but has now become embedded within the ribbon view itself in a tab here, and we can launch Petrosys from within Petrel by clicking on the icon in the ribbon. Now that I've launched Petrosys, I'm just going to jump into the surface modeling and open a task list which I have here, and I'm going to start by showing you the new well import wizard. This was something that was developed in version 17.5, and it gives us the ability to take wells from a third-party source and, using Petrosys as middleware, be able to push them into Petrel in this case. Now while I'm doing this, I'm connecting to a Kingdom project here, and this project is in CRS WGS 84, UTM 31 North, and I'll also be doing a coordinate conversion on this as I'm pushing the data into, as the Petrel project is in ED50 UTM 31 North. So I'll just click OK here. We'll move on to the next menu. You also have more options here for data selection for your wells. So you have the option here to use a selection file or using an expression. Or alternatively, you can also click to an area of interest using a Petrosys map sheet, but in this case we'll be doing neither. And I'll jump onto the next window. So again, we have further control as well in terms of the wells that we're pushing in. We can toggle these on and off manually. And then there's further control as well in terms of picking formations and horizons. So we can select via a specific author. In this case, we only have the one, so I'll select this one. And these are the formations that have been read and wrought over. And I can choose to edit these, the wells that will be pushed into, the type, and edit the formations. And then finally, we have the window here that controls the data we're pushing in. If we want to keep the data we're pushing in or replace what is already there, you have these options. And you also have the option, which is great, to produce a log file of this. This is in an HTML format, and this is useful in terms of auditing the data that's been moved between the two sources. This is key for data management and just to keep a good tight control on your data sets. So as you can see, I've pushed this data into Petrel. And I'll just knock on the 3D window here and toggle on the wells. And as you can see, the wells have been pushed into Petrel into this blank project. We can see the formations along the side. And if I zoom out and scroll around, we can see how it handles the deviations as well. We can also look in the spreadsheet view within Petrel. And we can query the data a bit further by looking at it within the spreadsheet. It's all okay. So I'll now move on to the main event, and I'll show you some of the new functionality that's been added in Petrosys version 17.6. We'll just go back to Petrosys and the surface modeling again. And within here, I have a task which uses the Spatial Data Translator. And as you can see here, the Spatial Data Translator slightly changed. We now have these filter options. And we also have new output options as well. So we have Excel to output to an Excel spreadsheet. We also have Kingdom culture files and Kingdom polygon files. But in this case, I'll be taking a shape file of well-bore information, and I'll be reading the attributes in that shape file and then pushing them out to an Excel spreadsheet. But first I'd like to actually filter the attributes that I have available in this shape file. So I only want exploration well types and those that contain oil. So I select those. And then for my output, select a suitable name and a suitable spreadsheet, as I've already done. But I would also like to edit some of the attributes. I don't need all these attributes that we have here. So it's just a case of just click to remove an attribute. And we can do multiple attributes all at once. So I don't need these. I'll just remove those. I'll click OK and OK again, and I'll just run that. So I've now pushed this into an Excel spreadsheet. If I just drag that over here, we can see we have all the data that's been read within the well-bore shapefile, and you can see the attributes that are removed have been taken out with the X and Y coordinates here. Now I can close this down, and I'm going to finish this demonstration by looking at the Spatial Editor, which has been brought in and replaces the Contour Fault Polygon Editor, as some of you may have used in the past, and hopefully you'll be quite happy with some of the improvements we've made. So I'll just open mapping here, and I'll just open my DBM. So the Spatial Editor is accessed in a very similar way to the Contour Fault Polygon Editor, which is just under Edit, and it's Spatial Editor here. You'll also notice in this version of Petrosys we've also added some new icons. So these can be embedded into your toolbar for any functions that you use regularly and are easily accessed. So we can access the Spatial Editor from here. Also I have the icon just here, which I'll click on. And you can also access the Spatial Editor by right-clicking, if it will, on the data and using Edit or File, Open. We can select a data source that we'd like to edit, or simply, as I'm going to show in this case, just drop and drag into the Spatial Editor. Now in this example here I have faults from the Gulf axis, and I'm going to start by showing you the vertex editing options that we have available. So I click on this icon here, and I'm just going to zoom into this area in question. I'm not quite happy with the throw on this fault. Now I can use the vertex editor to either just grab an individual vertex and move it, or alternatively I can select multiple vertices and I can just drag them. I'll just reduce that throw slightly. Just like that. Now there's also a number of operations that we've added to the Spatial Editor. And I'll show you some of the ones we have. So I have a shapefile here, just of well data in point form. And I'm just going to drag and drop that into the Spatial Editor. And what I can do with some of the new operations now, I have the ability to buffer shapes. Now this just doesn't have to be just point data. You can buffer faults, any type of shape file, polygon, Petrosys polygon file. But in this case here it is point data, and I'm just going to add a buffer around each point of 500 meters. I'm going to create it just as a new layer just in a temporary format, just in the memory. You can also just do a fully defined layer type and save that. So as you can see, the buffered shapes, the 500 meter exclusion zone is around the middle of each point. Now we also have options as well to edit attribute data, and this is done through layers, definition within the Spatial Editor, and we click on the attribute definition button, and within this menu here I can add an attribute. In this case I'm going to call this Z value, and I'm just going to put its type as decimal. Oh, I closed that a bit early because I'd like to also add another attribute here. I'm going to call this one operator, and this is just going to be in a text type. So now I'm happy with those attributes that I've added, and as you can see they've now been added into the attribute table here on the right of the menu. And now I'm going to populate this Z value within the wells by using the back interpolation option. I'm going to back interpolate from this grid just here. Now this grid doesn't actually have to be toggled on within the display menu. I'm just doing that to illustrate the grid in question. So I'm going to select back interpolate. In this case I'm using a Petrosys grid file, but alternatively I could use a grid from a third-party source, be it Dug Insight, Petrel, Kingdom for example. So you select your back interpolation source, select the attribute, which is Z value, OK, apply. As we see, 22 values have been added. Just close that. And if we look in the attribute menu here, we can see the wells have been populated, and the one that was just as an outlier has had nothing added to it. Now this isn't the only way that you can populate attributes. I can select a number at once, and I can just edit the attribute type within the table just here. So in this case I'm just going to put the operator as Statoil, and if I just query those we can see they've had Statoil added as an attribute. Now I'll just toggle off this grid, and I no longer need the wells anymore. I'm just going to show you some of the advancements in the editing of contours. So if you cast your mind back to earlier when I edited the throw on the fault, as you can see in this area here, the contours no longer snap to the fault itself. No need to worry, as we can edit these. I'll just drag the contours down. And we have the option here to snap lines to a fault. And we have two different snap methods available. We have the extrapolate and the bend option. So the bend option does exactly that, and it bends the contour to snap to the fault, as you can see here. And I'll show you on this next contour, and snap it to the fault. Now, the other option we have available is to extrapolate, and this carries on the contour in the direction of travel that it was on until it snaps to the fault, as you can see. So we just continue the contour line on until it reaches the fault. Now these are the new advancements that you'll see in the new Spatial Editor that replaces the contour fault polygon editor. There'll also be a video added to the video section of the Petrosys website, which will be a how to use the Spatial Editor, and that will just reinforce the ways in which you can use the Spatial Editor in the same way that you would have used the contour fault polygon editor in previous versions. Now I'm going to exit the Spatial Editor. You see you have the save option here. I'm not going to save the buffers that we created. And I'm going to show you some of the new advancements in our actual contouring. And I'll show you in this area here. So we now have the contour overpost correction. And this now gives us the option to just drag contours along a contour line, and we can move them so they're displayed in maybe slightly more suitable, more visible areas. There is some control here. You cannot post the contours on a bend, which had been an issue in some previous versions of Petrosys, but as this has now been resolved, as you can see here, it won't let me post to that point, but as I drag around it will then move once it's in a suitable position for posting. I can reverse a contour label. I can quite easily just remove a contour label and I can add a contour label back in as well. So this gives you some of the functionality that you may have been used to with the overpost correction of labels in Petrosys previously, and works in a very similar way. Now, that is the end of the demo part of this webinar. And we're just going to go back into the presentation just to recap a final few things and just to mention some more improvements that have been made in Petrosys. So as you can see here, we now have added support for Paradigm 14. We have some data analysis using crossplots. So whenever you have any data in a tabular format within Petrosys, you can right-click and you can use the crossplot functionality, which comes under the menu Analyze Data within Chart. We've also have new data sources for seismic surfaces and fault stick exchange. We can display directly contours and IHS kingdom grids. We've also got greater control over the quality of video available from the 3D viewer animations. We can also support spatial data which has exclusion zones. So this is sort of polygons which may have holes within the middle. This is now supported. And we also have the ability to import and export Petrel gradients. Now all these are detailed in the release notes that are available on the Petrosys website, www.petrosys.com.au. But if you do have any questions after this webinar, please feel free to direct them to info@petrosys.com.au or alternatively support@petrosys.com.au. Thank you very much for your time today, and goodbye.